Welcome to Samvadh. I'm in conversation with Miss Aarti Rajaratnam, a psychologist, author, and a curriculum consultant. Today, we're going to discuss the topic focus. Ma'am, one of my favorite topics because I struggle with staying focused on one aspect. For example, if I'm brushing my teeth, I don't focus on that. I have so many other things simultaneously I'm doing. Why does this happen, ma'am?
So before I go into that aspect of distraction, I'll also talk about focus is something that has become universally a problem for everyone. Before 2009, because I've been researching focus for quite some years now, my first aspect of research was how much time can a child focus in class, because we have classroom periods which are 40 minutes sometimes, and we expect a little 3-year-old, 5-year-old to be able to sit for 40 minutes. So my initial research in the 1990s, late 1990s, was we found that below the age of 10, children can focus for age plus 3 minutes.
Okay.
This was the number. And
So
then
if they're a 4-year child, they can only focus for 7 minutes.
And at that 7th minute, the teacher will say all of them are distracted, they're dropping pencils, they want to use the washroom.
They start getting fidgety.
Right. So then the screens came in, and then we've noticed a decline in focus, not just in children, but across age groups.
I'd like to ask you, when the screen came, people can stay on it for a very long time. So what is that focus, if you can explain later once you finish the initial?
No, I'd go there because it was not, when you originally saw the screens, it was never this I could be online all the time. It was the work of Azar Askin. Azar Askin was the one who brought that infinite scrolling. If you remember the old dial-up connections that I would have, it will take forever, and then at the end of the page you had to go back and again, sort of click somewhere to look at the next page. So we never had this infinite scrolling, so we were never online all the time. However, when Azar Askin's work came in, they realized that that's the best way to develop engagement, meaning keeping somebody online forever. So this has also contributed to the fact that people are not able to focus. Where I want to scientifically bring in some information that people need to know is the internet per se has been optimized to increase engagement.
Yes.
Right? So attention managers are employed specifically to understand how to keep people addicted for longer periods of time, because that is amazing for anybody. So we call that surveillance capitalism.
Surveillance capitalism, interesting.
Because till now capitalism was about wealth and about money and things like that, but now somebody's attention span is what capitalism is about.
Very true, very true.
Right? So keeping all this in mind, we need to understand that we're up against a huge industry which benefits so greatly from you and me being distracted.
So focus on screens is not actual focus, but it's a form of a distraction.
The screen has been developed, millions of dollars have been invested to make a screen mimic the mind so that you cannot discriminate. So let me give you an example. If you're addicted to something else, when you're addicted to anything generally,
sweets, alcohol,
anything, you have a point where you do have a guilt saying, I think I've had too much, right? I'm not even talking substance, but anything else. When you are generally addicted to something, you have a point of discrimination because it's different from what you should be doing. The internet has been designed to mimic the mind, meaning when you're casually sitting down, you have one thought and then it goes to another one, goes to another one. We call that mind wandering. And mind wandering is required for the species to survive.
Okay.
Right? So this is the default mode of the brain. So when I'm sitting down casually, I'm mind wandering. And usually what happens is I'll pick up based on negativity bias, which means I'll pick up the most significant negative experience. So if you had a conversation and you said something negative, my brain is going to pick on that and say, why did she say that? What is it? And I'm going to build on that and then see how best to optimize that. This is how the human brain has been engineered. Now the internet has started mimicking the same thing. How does it work? Every reel is a couple of seconds and then it shifts to another, It mimics the mind. So any average person does not discriminate between the internet and their own mind, which is why it is so much more dangerous to be addicted to the internet, and focus is the price we are paying for it.
How so?
Because obviously that's what they're cashing in on, right? Right? Keeping this in mind, I'd like to bring to mind that there are two types of focus that we require or that we function on. One, like I already mentioned, is the mind wandering, the default mode. I need mind wandering to be able to make sense of what I'm experiencing in life. So for example, my physics teachers taught me something in physics. Mind wandering after the physics class helps me integrate all this information.
Okay.
Right? Or if I've had a conversation with a friend and my friend has told me about a particularly difficult time she's going through or something like that, my mind wandering goes back on all the patterns that she exhibits to see how best I can support her. So in everything, even if I want to buy a t-shirt, I need an element of mind wandering to be able to identify, oh, I have something similar. Do I really want to buy this? So the default mode is actually something that supports me across life.
Okay.
The second type of focus is what we call the spotlight focus. Spotlight focus is where, like on a stage when you're in a spotlight, it's a spotlight focus required for very, very focused work. Like I need to study, I need to finish something. What people think is that you should always have spotlight focus and that's the only focus to have. That's not true.
That's impossible also. Almost.
I won't say impossible as much as not necessary. Because no organism can function at that level, right? And why I'm saying not necessary is you may assimilate a lot of information, but for it to become an experience, I need default. If you look at it, the greatest scientific discoveries and inventions were made when somebody was in a bathtub, when somebody was walking, when somebody was sleeping.
Yes.
Very rarely that you've seen that they were actually sitting with a microscope or with a tool and then they came up with something, which is why I'm trying to say that if I take away default focus from you, from your life, I can make you a slave very easily. Right? If I'm constantly keeping you looking at reels and I'm optimizing content for you, you're constantly going to be fed on information that is not of any use to you, but you're not also going to assimilate anything new that is of value for you.
So basically, I'm only accumulating the knowledge, not assimilating or applying it. Only in the first.
You become a consumer, not a contributor. And in an AI-driven world, the consumers are very, very easy target. The contributors are the ones that are going to be very, very strong. Keeping this in mind, our children have already been born and been taught to become consumers, passive consumers. We need to change that, which is why hands-on play has to be brought in long term. This is where Daniel Goleman brings in 3 aspects of focus. He calls them the inner focus, the outer focus and the other focus. It's a beautiful way to look at focus. Inner focus is where I start taking away the screens, etc., focusing on my own personal experiences. What is the emotion I'm feeling? Am I having a sensation? Is that hunger? Am I experiencing pain? Is there something I want to change? So these things, aspects of myself, which are both congruent and incongruent, which I'm able to make sense of. Once I develop good inner focus, then I start building outer focus. For example, I start making a note of things that is happening in my environment. What are the things that are contributing? What can I change? All of this. When I have a good synthesis of inner and outer focus, that's when I'm ready for a relationship.
How does this come in?
So when I don't have a connect with myself and I'm not cognizant of the things around me, how will I be in a relationship? What will contribute to the growth in the relationship? To be able to empathize with you. To have this conversation, forget anything else, to have this conversation. Both of us are very aligned to the self, right? We are taking experiences of focus that we are talking about real time. Secondly, I'm also aware that, this is a setup. The stimulation is, the aspect of, the lighting here, how much of my hands can I move, there is a camera here, all of this. I'm aware of the fact that we are recording this for a very focused purpose. So I'm not going away from the conversation. I'm making sure that I'm very, very aware of what is happening. Only when I have these two, can I understand your questions, empathize with what you're asking, and reciprocate in the most optimal way. And this is not just in conversation, it's in intimate partner relationships, it's in parent-child relationship, it's in friendships. In any relational context, if I'm not focused on the self and I'm not focused on my environment, I will not be able to build a relationship.
Could you give us one example on this, ma'am, especially on the inner focus and how it helps in connecting with the outer focus?
The simplest thing, there is a little child who wants the mother's attention. Let's say he or she is 3 years old, wants the mother's attention. Many times she's on reels, so there's no inner focus. She's just being distracted. Her entire focus has been taken on a screen. She's not even aware of what is happening around her, because you lose time when you're on reels.
Yes.
You lose time. You don't realize that how 20 minutes, 40 minutes just went away from my hands just like that. So the child is now saying, these are my needs, meet my needs. So she just gives the child a gadget as well, distracts him. So there is no inner focus for her, no outer focus for her. She's also training the child to do the same thing. And what is suffering? The mother-child relationship, because the child is going to be young only once. After 4 such experiences, he's going to say, if I go to my mother, she's only going to give the gadget. Let me just figure out how to use the gadget myself.
So would you be able to give us some tips or how to work on inner focus, outer focus?
The simplest way that I will start with is get in touch with nature. Because there's nothing better than that. Because when I go out for a walk, or when I play, I come from Tamil Nadu, we use the beach for everything, right? So if I play in the beach, if I go to the hills, whatever happens, I'm actually creating multisensory experiences for myself, which are so enriching, number one. Secondly, I could develop small hobbies like going out for a run, exercising, not for the sake of putting up in, reels and things like that, but for the sake of just personal well-being,
staying connected with
the self, right? Then I can also do things like reading, or find small groups that I can form with common interests. If you remember, I grew up in a world that was like that. Friends together would develop something together, work together, things like that. So I would start going back to those simplified ways of living, because once I move away from there, I'm keeping my default mode of focus alive. When my default mode is alive, I'm going to find many more ways to make my life beautiful, as opposed to being distracted by reels all through my life.
So how does focus in education, exams mean, ma'am? What does that focus mean?
One, like we use in school, we have a lot of hands-on learning, because hands-on, the brain needs a hand, the hand needs a brain, right? So when you bring in hands-on learning, as opposed to just putting something on a board or a digital board and expecting children to memorize facts, you're already enhancing focus by 90%, because a multisensory process is happening there. Second thing that I would do is, in an interaction like that, the teacher and the student are so connected to each other to be able to resonate with each other, right? Third, I would say in the educational thing, many parents bring children home and then they put them in tuitions. That's the worst place to learn. Reason being, the child is not, again, inner focus. Somebody is going to teach them, somebody is going to ask them questions. They are not going to be self-driven learners. So what a parent can do at that point is to set a regular timing for the child, saying this is the time that you're going to sit down to study. Second, set up specific space where the child can learn. So it must be a fixed place, just like my bed is in a particular place and I know that if I go there I'm going to sleep. This is my place for study, and this is something that I will use only for study. And that has to be a table and chair preferably, or a mat facing a wall. And it can be a plain wall, it can be any wall but a plain color. Meaning whenever I look up, there is no stimulation there, I come back to my book. Third, I teach children to sit with only one subject at a time. Finish that, move to the next one. Because otherwise, we are so used to infinite scrolling. I'll take my physics book, look at it for some time, then go to my chemistry book, then I'll go to something else. I'm not going to do any focused work. And then the most important, once I've finished all of this, make either a mind map or write down points or something. Use a physical tool, not screenshotting. When I move away from that, I break what is called screen inferiority, which is learning from a screen, to actual three-dimensional learning, which stays longer and enhances focus over a period of time. That practice builds both default and spotlight.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It makes me realize how much of that wandering time for every child and adult is so important to focus on various aspects of our life or the things we do. I hope all of you have also have enjoyed this session, and I hope to see you in the next Samvadh. Thank you.